Washington Journal continues.
Syndicated columnist and now television host Michelle Malkin. Good morning. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning, Steve. Thanks for having me.
What's this new project?
Well, CRTV.com is a subscription-based internet news and opinion and entertainment network, and I really think the time has come for an entity like this. I've had a foot in both old and new media for the last 25 years, believe it or not. I'm coming up on my quarter-century mark. And I am hosting an investigative show, which is, it is really an engine that has motivated me for so long. I mean, most people know me from yelling at people on the other side of the political aisle. For 13 years, I did that for Fox News. But my roots are in investigative journalism and hard-edged, opinion-based newspaper journalism. I worked for 2 major metropolitan newspapers, and I had the freedom in my columns to do much more of news breaking that you don't get to do in a 3 or 4 minute segment on cable news. And so at CRTV.com, I've got 4 episodes. This is where I've been the last several months because I sort of stepped back a little bit from the limelight, and I go in depth into some of the same topics that I've covered over the course of my syndicated newspaper column career, and certainly my books, Invasion and Culture of Corruption. So we've got an incredible first 2-part series on a former police officer, Daniel Holtzclaw, who was convicted a year ago this weekend. December 10th is the anniversary of the announcement of his verdict. And it made sort of fleeting national news because he broke down into tears when the verdict was announced. And anyone who sort of followed superficially the news coverage just assumed that he was guilty and that he was crying because he got caught. But I fielded an email from a family friend of his that urged me to take a deeper look. And with this show, I was able to do that. I traveled to Oklahoma City. I interviewed the 2 police detectives who were in the lead of the case, as well as Daniel from behind bars and his family. And I've come to the conclusion that a massive miscarriage of justice took place. We also have an investigation on the EB-5 citizenship for sale racket, which of course is, I think, endemic and emblematic of the swamp here, because it's a government program that has been turned into a reward program and boondoggle for political cronies, essentially using a green card program to benefit large real estate interests and people who have ties to the highest level of government. And this is a program that has been tied to schemes that Harry Reid, the departing Harry Reid, was involved in, as well as a number of Republicans as well.
And people can keep track of all of your work at michellemalkin.com, and you're tweeting at Michelle Malkin. But let me go back to a piece that you wrote for townhall.com, and I thought that this is interesting. We actually pulled an excerpt of this speech from Peter Thiel, but you said this was the most important speech of the 2016 election. So let's watch a portion. It's available on our website at cspan.org, and come back to get your reaction.
Now, I don't agree with everything Donald Trump has said and done, and I don't think the millions of other people voting for him do either. Nobody thinks his comments about women were acceptable. I agree, they were clearly offensive and inappropriate. But I don't think the voters pull the lever in order to endorse a candidate's flaws. It's not a lack of judgment that leads Americans to vote for Trump. We're voting for Trump because we judge the leadership of our country to have failed. This judgment has been hard to accept for some of the country's most fortunate, socially prominent people. It's certainly been hard to accept for Silicon Valley, where many people have learned to keep quiet if they dissent from the coastal bubble. Louder voices have sent a message that they do not intend to tolerate the views of 1/2 of the country. This intolerance has taken on some bizarre forms. The Advocate, a magazine which once praised me as a gay innovator, even published an article saying that as of now I am, and I quote, not a gay man, unquote, because I don't agree with their politics. The lie behind the buzzword of diversity could not be made more clear. If you don't conform, then you don't count as diverse, no matter what your personal background.
Silicon Valley investor behind PayPal, Peter Thiel and Michelle Malkin. Why was this, in your words, the most important speech of 2016?
I think that Peter Thiel so eloquently threw down the gauntlet on decades of extremist identity politics. Not only was he able to distill for so many independent Trump voters why they chose Trump over the rest of the massive field for president, but he also took a very brave stand, as he did at the Republican National Convention when he gave his landmark speech, rejecting the boxes. If only more of those coastal bubble elites in the mainstream media had tuned into C-SPAN and taken less than an hour of their time to listen to what Peter Thiel said at the National Press Club, perhaps they wouldn't have been so shell-shocked when the results of the election came in. You've had this reflexive smearing of Trump voters, their intentions, what their ideology is, how they feel about minorities in America. And this is an out-of-the-closet gay man in progressive, liberal Silicon Valley, basically throwing off the ideological shackles of conformist, orthodox Democrat politics.
And yet you've had your own exchanges with Donald Trump.
Yes.
This is from 2013. He called you a dummy, and he said you were born stupid.
Well, we all are, aren't we? I think even I fell into the trap of being baited and perceiving these throw-off tweets as more than what they were. And boy, was I raging mad about it. I was warning people several years ago that Donald Trump was essentially a cancer, and I didn't see the big picture, and that was my mistake. And I think that a lot of my friends in the sort of proclaimed obstinate never Trump camp didn't see it either.
Why were so many so wrong?
Well, with regard to Donald Trump's persona on Twitter, I think mistaking that social media persona for the real man, a businessman who has been in the public eye and in the corporate world for some, 30, 40 years now, I think that there was too much of a knee-jerk response to the celebrity as opposed to the man who became a political maverick. And for me, of course, because immigration enforcement and national sovereignty have been so important to me since I started my career, certainly covering the issue in Los Angeles, writing my first book, Invasion, which presaged, I think, the themes of this election cycle, the need for systemic enforcement, and the idea that our preservation rests on making sure that we have a system of, as Donald Trump calls it, quote unquote, extreme vetting, that's what persuaded me that this was worth a try, that it was worth the gamble. And with an Attorney General nominee like Jeff Sessions, something I never would have imagined would have ever been possible, yes, I have to place cautious but optimistic trust in this administration.
As you know, Time Magazine, its Person of the Year is Donald Trump. This is what the cover looks like. It's on newsstands today, available online at time.com. And Nancy Gibbs, the editor-in-chief, summarizes it this way. I want to get your reaction. She said that 2016 was the year of Donald Trump's rise. 2017 will be the year of his rule. And so my question is, what will that look like? What will the Trump White House, the decision-making process, the governing style look like? like we've seen so far?
I think so, and I think that this transition has been orderly and efficient, contrary to all of the apocalyptic Chicken Little analysis from the Never-Trumpers in the Washington press corps. And a lot of it has been, I think, very satisfactory to the core base of Trump supporters. As I said, I think that Jeff Sessions' pick signals to people that he is absolutely serious about the sovereignty agenda that I think in large part put him in office. On the other hand, this is a man who over the years has wavered on certain issues, and also I think has only been recently introduced to some of the policy issues that are very important to people. And so I'll give you a specific example of that. The Education Secretary nominee is Betsy DeVos, the wife of Richard DeVos. They're a very wealthy couple who've been involved in Republican politics for a long time in Michigan. Donald Trump has explicitly said to grassroots parents that he would, quote unquote, end Common Core, and yet Betsy DeVos, while she was very active in education policy in Michigan, was on the wrong side of that, not merely voicing words of support for the Common Core regime, but actually backing it with her money. And so, of course, now, like many erstwhile supporters of Common Core who have changed their minds, she says that she is foursquare against it, but she's going to have to prove to these parents that it's more than just a convenient pivot for her.
If you want to read one of the most recent articles by Michelle Malkin, Identity Politics in America, a post-mortem looking back at the election, but also the 8 years of the Obama presidency. Let's get to your calls and comments with our guest, Michelle Malkin. Her work available online at michellemalkin.com. Annie from Youngstown, Ohio. Good morning. Democrats line.
Yeah, is this me?
Yes, go ahead.
Nan. You know, I really hope that Trump can do a good job based on, you know, his ability to manipulate and all the other things that he does. I don't trust a person that can't admit their mistakes. He is the epitome of capitalist Republican white male. And I hope that, you know, I hope that he stops picking on people. And, you know, I do think he has a character disorder of some type, and I hope it doesn't play that way. We've come too far in this country to give it all up to him. Martin Luther King said all the blacks ever wanted was jobs, jobs, jobs. And that's what people want. It gives them identity. It gives them self-esteem. And, you know, all this other stuff, we all want jobs, and we all want this country to get back working. And don't forget, it was the businessmen that opened up China and built General Electric.
Ann from Youngstown, Ohio, thank you for the call. We'll get a response.
Jobs, jobs, jobs. And I think that both in substance and in message and style, Donald Trump has used this transition period to signal that, in fact, that is a priority for him. And as much as ardent free market conservatives, as I have counted myself for a long time, might be somewhat troubled by the intervention in the carrier deal, it is another significant historical milestone, I think, because for as long as I've covered politics in the last quarter century, the idea of a president-elect forging a deal to save rank-and-file jobs at a manufacturing plant, I know it's been characterized as so-called crony capitalism, but there's no political crony involved here. And even given the caveat, of course, that Carrier has a lot of military contracts that were at stake, there was an instinct here on Donald Trump's part to save American jobs, and he did it. And you can quibble about how many jobs he saved, but this is a storied American company, and just by coincidence, I did a chapter on Carrier in Who Built That, my history book from last year. And I think it is worth reminding people that the American manufacturing sector is alive and well in this country. And the caller mentioned, in particular, black workers and their need for jobs and some sort of self-fulfillment. Well, the jobs that were saved at Carrier belonged to people of all races and political backgrounds and ideologies, and I think it's incredibly significant.
This is a minor story, but it's getting some headlines today. This is from the Washington Post. Donald Trump to keep his credit on Apprentice. He'll maintain a financial stake to the program, and he'll be listed as the executive producer. The show returns to NBC on January 2nd as Arnold Schwarzenegger, the new host of The Apprentice. Your thoughts?
Well, I just want to say something about the power of celebrity, and of course the role it played in vaulting Donald Trump into the political stratosphere. I think that he used his celebrity in a very strategic way, and there's this paradox because, of course, all of the biggest celebrities in the world could not save Hillary Clinton. And I think that there was a rejection of Hollywood elites who presume to tell their viewers and fans how they should think, who they should vote for, and that it matters. And to quote my friend Laura Ingraham, there was certainly a referendum on that overreach, I think, in entertainment. And as she always said, these people should just shut up and sing.
Is she the new White House press secretary?
Well, we'll have to see. I saw her yesterday, and I've known her a long time. I told her that it would be pay-per-view popcorn viewing. Of course, we'd watch it here on C-SPAN. I would love to see her. I think that she would be the most qualified person to handle the White House press corps. But these are really momentous decisions to make. I mean, just as human beings, I mean, we think of our public figures as so accessible to the public, and that it would be such an easy thing to sort of, reorient your entire life. She's a wonderful mother, and she's got incredible businesses that she runs as well. But I would love it.
Let's get back to your calls. John is joining us from Wisconsin, also on the Democrats line, from Michelle Malkin. Good morning. Thank you for waiting.
Yes. I just had one thing to say about Donald Trump. I mean, a lot of people that voted for him don't understand that it takes a long time to learn government. I mean, government is a business just like a regular business, and it takes a long time to learn it. There's a lot of things that Donald Trump doesn't know, and I could tell by the people he's putting in there that they have credentials, but they don't have any background as far as government business is concerned.
Well, I certainly agree that government is a business, but Donald Trump has assembled a very experienced team. I think the tricky part of it is to recruit people who have that experience, who are in but not of Washington, and to try and avoid this landmine, almost a cognitive dissonance of wanting to drain the swamp, but needing people who've inhabited the swamp a long time to navigate those waters, murky waters.
We'll go to Chet, Republican line, also from Wisconsin. Good morning.
Good morning. Michelle, your parents must be so proud of you. Michelle, I'd like to prove there was a quid pro quo with the Clinton Foundation with Hillary. If you take an audit of the donations of the hundreds of thousands of dollars and the millions of dollars going into the Clinton Foundation before the election and then do it after the election. Also, wouldn't you love to see the list of cancellation of Clinton's speeches after the election?
That sounds like a job for a good investigative reporter. Sounds like the next Michelle Malkin Investigates episode.
Let's go to Gwendolyn joining us from Show Low, Arizona. This on the Independent line. Good morning. Gwendolyn, you with us? We'll try one more time.
Yes, good morning.
Good
Thank
morning.
you for taking my call
Sure.
this morning. Hi.
Go ahead.
Hi,
You're on
how
the
are
air.
you?
We're fine. Go ahead.
Hi. I think that Donald Trump is going to do a fairly good job. When he was campaigning, he talked about one of his priorities was to change the infrastructure for the ghettos, and I thought that was excellent. I mean, Obama, you know, he was in office for 8 years and he did nothing, especially for the people in his hometown in Chicago. And I think he has a dream. You know, his dream is to make America great again, and I think that he's going to follow through with some of the things that he had said. You know, people are coming over from India, and they're getting grants for, you know, 7-Elevens and hotels, and the poor black communities are living in the ghettos as if like they're still in World War II, and that's crazy. You know, I mean, people are living on food stamps. You know, they have to decide whether or not they want to sell drugs that day just to live. I mean, it's awful. So I think he's going to do a good job.
Thank you for the call. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think it was significant, of course, that in the last days of the campaign, while Hillary was chilling and basically phoning it in, Donald Trump was in Detroit. And this flies in the face of the false narrative, the fake news from so much of the liberal progressive media that Donald Trump was this unrepentant racist who didn't care about minorities. And the fact is that his message was a universal one that appealed to any American, whatever their color, who has aspirations and who still believes in social mobility in America. And 8 years of hope and change enriched a lot of people at the expense of so many of the constituencies that the Democrat Party always pays lip service to. So there's so many pathologies in the inner cities that have been run for decades by Democrats who have enriched themselves, again, at the expense of their own constituencies. And that covers every aspect of their lives, from the economy to the schools and certainly to law enforcement. And another, I think, very significant and substantive gesture that Donald Trump has taken that signaled that a new sheriff was in town was his reaching out to the widows and families of law enforcement officers in this transition period who have been killed. And the war on cops over the last 8 years has leveled at a devastating death toll that hasn't gotten nearly as much attention in the press as it should.
We welcome our radio audience on C-SPAN Radio. Our guest is Michelle Malkin, who is a multi-dimensional journalist, author. She's a syndicated columnist. She is also now with a new television series on CRTV. Let me ask you about Senator Harry Reid. He is officially stepping down. We covered his farewell ceremony yesterday in the Kennedy Caucus Room. This morning he has written an op-ed for the New York Times called Farewell, Fair Senate, defending Obamacare, saying ending the filibuster on most nominations was the right thing to do. He will, of course, be replaced by Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, and among those paying tribute, the House Democratic leader, Nancy Pelosi. Listen carefully to what she said.
It has been my privilege to work side by side with Harry Reid for more than a decade. To observe Harry is to observe a master at work. His effectiveness sprang from his commitment to his values, but his respect also for his colleagues. Harry and I had many occasions to evaluate the leadership and the courage of our colleagues as we've entered one fray or another. In all of my years, again, more than 10, working with Harry as leaders, he always spoke in the most glowing, respectful, and understanding way about all of his senators and Republican senators as well. Very respectful of everyone's point of view, the constituents they represented. Never anything but the finest word.
Michelle Malkin.
That's fake news right there. I think to any half-alert denizen of the Beltway swamp, Harry Reid has conducted himself in a manner that might most politely be called brass knuckles thuggery, and certainly the victims of his rhetoric and his actions over the years can attest to that. But I think this says as much about Nancy Pelosi as it does about Harry Reid and this, very stubborn and amazing and surreal attempt to rewrite the history in front of our noses. Tom Cotton, the senator from Arkansas, correctly described Harry Reid's political behavior as quote unquote cancerous. And I wish there had been a rebuttal to that elegy.
Well, let me ask you about fake news, because another comment from another speaker, Hillary Clinton, who also spoke yesterday at the Harry Reid tribute, the outgoing Senate Democratic leader. Here's what she said.
Let me just mention briefly one threat in particular that should concern all Americans, Democrats, Republicans, and independents alike, especially those who serve in our Congress. The epidemic of malicious fake news and false propaganda that flooded social media over the past year. It's now clear that so-called fake news can have real-world consequences. This isn't about politics or partisanship. Lives are at risk, lives of ordinary people just trying to go about their days, to do their jobs, contribute to their communities. It's a danger that must be addressed, and addressed quickly. Bipartisan legislation is making its way through Congress to boost the government's response to foreign propaganda, and Silicon Valley is starting to grapple with the challenge and threat of fake news. It's imperative that leaders in both the private sector and the public sector step up to protect our democracy and innocent lives.
Hillary Clinton yesterday here in Washington, D.C. Does she have a point?
I wish she would spare us all the sanctimony. I'll get to the fake news in a second, but this is a woman who is now warning about the risk to American lives of fakery, and she ran the State Department that gave us a fake, phony pretext about Benghazi, blaming a video on it when it was clear in all the machinations behind the scenes, of course, that they all knew that what the real reason for the Benghazi attack was. So let's talk about this fake news. I mean, we've been hearing about it thousands of times a day. It is a tactic. And I can tell you, as somebody who has operated as an independent purveyor of journalism, somebody who was at the vanguard of the conservative blogosphere, that this kind of strategy of marginalizing people outside of the traditional media elite has a purpose, and that purpose is to prevent new competitors in that marketplace. So smear and with a broad brush, everybody who is not attached to one of the dinosaur networks, or who does not have some Sorbonne-like certification from a top Ivy League J school. And then everybody gets associated with the rogue operators out there who are spreading, truly fake news. Journalism is not rocket science. It is not brain surgery. Anybody can do it. And of course, that is a threat to people who are trying to control narratives. And of course, we should vet every single news source, but the solution is not to ban or limit the number of voices out there. It has always been my opinion that the answer to bad or fake or phony or unreliable speech is more and better speech. And that is why I'm involved in CRTV.com.
And also the author of a number of books, including Sold Out: How High-Tech Billionaires and Bipartisan Beltway Crap Weasels Are Screwing America's Best and Brightest Workers. How did you come up with this title?
It's sort of like a trademark of mine. I think if you've got one shot to sell a book to someone, you got to let them know what it's all about and tell them the bottom line.
What is a crap weasel?
Well, you know, a crap weasel, I think, is usually a political figure who is vaulted into office and sent here to Washington with one agenda, and then grows moss on his or her back and betrays the very people who put them in place. And that certainly is what happened with the H-1B program, which was stated as something that was going to help the American economy and at the same time protect American workers. And this issue, I think it was very well timed when the book came out, became very prominent with the firing of Disney workers and Southern California Edison workers and many workers who worked at tech programs and in the IT industry who were being forced to train their foreign replacements as a condition of receiving their severance pay. And I think that indignity, that salt in the wound, is what sort of motivated a new awareness of a program that's been in place since 1990. Donald Trump, in his transition video last week, reiterated his pledge to do something about that, and I think he needs to remind his labor secretary of that commitment.
Kevin from Toms River, New Jersey. Good morning, Independent Line.
Good morning. Thank you, C-SPAN. Michelle, I watched you for many years, and the last number of years, ABC, NBC, or CBS has not put you on, and I wanted to know how you felt about that. And also, since you brought up the fake news, I don't understand how these three stations don't realize their credibility is being lost with half of the country, and the other half don't care because they're just putting out what they like to hear.
Thank you, Kevin.
Well, over the last several years, I've appeared in many media outlets, but I have, like I said, I've been busy. I live in Colorado. I moved away from the Beltway Swamp almost about 10 years ago now, and I've loved living outside of the coastal bubbles that Peter Thiel was talking about. But I have been continuing to produce books. I did 2 last year, as well as my newspaper column, which, as I said, is marking more than 2 decades in existence now. And over the last several months, I really have been wrapped up with Michelle Malkin Investigates and going out on the ground there. I mean, this is the antidote to fake news, doing real investigative journalism, and it's probably one of the most golden opportunities I've had in my career.
On the CRTV website, if you want to check out her latest investigative documentaries. Bonnie from Street, Maryland, Republican Line, good morning.
Yes, I have 3 quick points. My first one is, I used to do construction. I went through a bankruptcy, and everybody down the chain got less. They call him a genius. It doesn't take a genius to file bankruptcy, and he's never, to be honest, he's never paid an honest day's wage when it comes to construction. All right, my second point is, he wants to charge tarps on everybody to bring their products back. Not one Trump product with his label or his daughter is made in the U.S. And my third point is, what really is, they showed him on TV at his hotel in Florida. They were all from India. He made the remark that 95% of them were on Obamacare. And then somebody called it and come back and said, oh, no, they're not. Well, which is right? Are they on Obamacare? And is he paying a fair wage? Because if they come here on them visas, they have to sign a non-disclosure, and they can't work for anyone else but him.
Bonnie, thank you. A couple of points on the table.
A lot of good points there. I would say that when you're in business, as long as Donald Trump has been, you're going to have many successes and you're going to have failures. And so he has a mixed track record, no doubt about it. And I had also been very critical of the use of eminent domain in Atlantic City. I grew up in South Jersey, and the use of eminent domain to build his empire in the casino district there. So it is not an unblemished record for sure. And there have been concerns among many watchdogs on the foreign employment visa programs of Donald Trump's use of them, and also some sort of vacillating statements he's made about them. So I think that's why, in particular, this labor secretary nomination is troubling to some of his most ardent defenders on immigration policy.
Let's go to Brad in International Falls, Minnesota, Republican line. Question for you first. How cold is it there this morning?
Well, it's not bad. It's normal. It's cold, but it's okay. I mean,
what's normal?
Live with it.
What's normal, Brad?
Well, I was at a funeral here about a week ago, and a lady asked me what it was like 60 years ago, because she was telling me that it was warmer then 60 years ago than it was today, and it's warmer than normal right now. But we can't change that, okay? Nor can man. So
okay,
but,
go ahead with your question or comment.
You know, we're talking about the fake news. That's really interesting, and I keep listening and hearing about this, and I shake my head at, you know, they want to keep blaming the Russians. Well, Russians didn't write Hillary's emails. She did. She was the one that didn't want to hand them over. She was the one that said that she handed them all over. Well, that was a complete lie. That's fake news. And to our panelist there, Michelle, I mean, I think the world of her. I really do. And I think that she does know, but she's like in with the wolves again on C-SPAN, because I think C-SPAN has turned into nothing more than CNN or MSNBC. So
why do you say that, Brad?
Well, because it's always slanted, and you always are asking questions from people like myself that I know that you disagree with me wholeheartedly.
I just asked you what the temperature was today. I was just curious.
No, that isn't what I'm saying. You know exactly. You're just diverting. But you're a Democrat.
I really just was curious how cold it was in International Falls, Minnesota. But Brad, thank you for the call. You still on the line? I don't want to hang up on you. Brad? Well, we'll get a response.
Well, I appreciate his opinion. I think it's good for all of us to get feedback. But I would say, and I'm not just saying this because I'm here sitting with you, Steve. I tell this to people all the time. When I have to go out on media tours and descend from my mountaintop in Colorado, the thing I always look most forward to is this time and space. And C-SPAN's history is a proud one of doing justice to the First Amendment and the privilege we have as information providers. I don't know what your politics are after all of these years. And I think probably because there's been so much bias in cable news programming and the pretense of objectivity that, you know, listeners and viewers who are not accustomed to straight questions and straight unfiltered delivery of news that's happening on Capitol Hill, that they automatically assume there must be bias. This is a horrible thing if you think about it, that people feel that that the people that are on their cameras have contempt for them. And that is something that there ought to be much more introspection about in elite media circles. And instead, they're doubling and tripling down on the same ways of delivering their narratives as they have over the past 30 years. I do want to say that he absolutely has a point about for example, the dinosaur networks, which are now all broadcasting Hillary's comments and condemning things like Pizzagate. But does anybody remember Rathergate? That was CBS and Dan Rather who faked Texas Air National Guard documents. And it was those little citizen bloggers and citizen journalists who were not credentialed who were the ones that brought them down. Or the exploding trucks on NBC, or even in this past election cycle when CNN had to admit, and I remember Jake Tapper saying that it was, quote, journalistically terrifying or horrifying that there was someone within their organization that was leaking questions to Hillary Clinton.
I think he called it malpractice, yes.
Yes, he did.
We have time for one more call, and you're always welcome. We love having you on anytime, either here or in Colorado. I won't ask you what the temperature is in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, Marcia. Just go ahead with your question or comment. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, can you hear me?
We sure can.
Yes, I have a question. As far as Donald Trump is concerned, when will he stand behind his numbers? In other words, when will he stand behind what he really is doing and not based off of what he thinks he is doing? Because apparently a lot of his numbers over the past have been gigantically enormous. And then when you find through investigative journalism that the numbers are in fact are not true.
We'll get a response. Marcia, thank you.
I'm not sure which numbers she's talking about. If I'm just going to speculate here that it's either, say, the job creation numbers in the carrier deal, or the idea that there were a large number of people who cast votes that were illegal in this election cycle. The knee-jerk swamping of that kind of information that, oh my gosh, it must not be true, I think serves a political and ideological agenda, you know, when the fact is that, you know, you've got even academics who are don't have any special political interests who've been pointing to that problem, for example, to just sort of reflexively say that there's no election fraud in this country is as much fake news as anything else.
We only have a minute left, but just look ahead to January or February when Donald Trump makes his appointment, his nomination for the U.S. Supreme Court. What will the battle look like here in Washington?
Bloody. I think it will make, for those of us who have long memories, the battles over, say, Robert Bork look like kindergarten. I think everybody's got a gird their loins, as Joe Biden famously said.
Michelle Malkin, her work available online and also on Twitter at Michelle Malkin, and your new venture at CRTV. They can check it out at what website?
CRTV.com, and I've got 4 episodes that are available right now.
Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. Please come back again.
Thank you so much, Steve.